Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I am Barry Rowland. In this episode, we'll be reviewing the VNM Shifter. With its all-metal construction, complex-looking shifting mechanisms, this looks to be a shifter worth its $200 price tag. Time to put it through the SRG's review process and see how it does. So, let's get to it. So let's take a closer look at this VNM Shifter. Out of the box, it has some pretty good heft to it. It's all metal casing here. It has the logo for V on there. I believe that lights up, and we're going to check that out in a minute. The casing is kind of an octagonal shape almost. And it's very sturdy in hand. It doesn't feel flexy at all. This thing is pretty sturdy. Now, it is a little bit weak on the shifting out of the box for what I would like to see. But I believe that this piece in here is going to be how we increase the tension. See that there's a hex in there, set screw maybe. Again, we'll get to that when we get there. On the bottom, we can see the branding, VNM Shifter. And we can see some mounting holes here. These are M6. We have 4 of those, so you can put a plate across the bottom of this and then maybe mount it with the overhang of the plate like a flange, mount it to something else. Or we have a lot of mounting holes over here for table clamp type mount. Those are M6 holes. We have 9 of them. We have a USB-B over here for computer connection. We have a selector switch for sequential or H pattern, whichever one you want. We also have 2 USB-A's on here, and typically that is a CAN connection. You can see the little logo there, got like a bunch of people together. It usually means CAN, and I'm not sure what the top one is. Might be some kind of a firmware update port, but we'll find out what those do as we get there. Right now it has a 8 shifter or an 8 pattern. Go and get this out of the way. Gate on there, and you can see down the internals a little bit. Nice looking internals, all steel. So we'll get a better look at that once we do the look inside. But right now it is a 8 pattern gate. There is no push down as far as like if you push down and put the gearbox in reverse. That doesn't exist on this. So it's if you have a reverse, you're just gonna have to select the gears reverse, which of course just set it up in game any way you want to use it. But otherwise, it seems to be done very well. The knobs are interchangeable. Let's take this one off. This is what I would call an H pattern. And there is a piece that we put onto the shifter shaft itself. And this has 2 set screws in it. You can see one there. And we got one on the other side. That allows us to raise it up and down. I can actually get this shifter, I was playing with it, pretty low on here. So if you want that little wrist action shifting, you can do that. So it's nice that this is hollow enough inside of here, and you can see the threads inside. You see how deep that goes. Might be able to see that. But yeah, you can get it pretty far down. We have another shifter handle here that you can use for your 8 pattern or your sequential, and you can see the end of it down there. I imagine this would get even closer to the top of the shifter. We'll play with that once we get there. What else we get? Let's talk about the gates. Again, this is an 8 pattern on this gate. They're interchangeable, obviously. There is a 6-speed with reverse. I imagine that's what this gate is all about. And they only go on one way, by the way. From what I can tell, this is supposed to be pointing or facing the driver so that you see the logo when it lights up, I guess. And of course, if you're doing a table mount, then obviously you want your mount to be on the other side anyway. So I'm pretty sure that's the way you're going to want to mount it. So we have the 6-speed with reverse or 7-speed. Then we have a 6-speed or a 5-speed with reverse. And these have these, it's almost like, imagine this is Delrin, the plastic on it. It's very slick, but it feels very tough. So when we're, and all of these have them on it. You can see it's got one on this one too. And of course it's got one on this one. So when you're shifting in the gates, it's not a metallic sound. Right? We're going up against this very hard plastic material, and you can see it kind of shows itself. See the extra piece you see? It's kind of recessed down in there. That's what that plate is. And it keeps things nice and quiet. We have some notches or curves or angles, whatever you want to call them, cut into the gates. A good example is right down there. You can see how those are shaped. And of course, that aids in shifting. So when I'm shifting down from, let's say this was like 6th gear to 5th gear, that would aid me into slapping it down like that and would follow naturally because the angle would be following it. So that, and of course, going back up is the same thing because we have them on both sides of the gates. We got them on the top too. So as I'm going up, that helps me catch the side of this gate and guide it in like that. Pretty quiet. Not a heavy feel to it at all, but again, I'm pretty sure we can adjust that with this tension. I imagine that's what that is. Usually that's what that means, there's a tension adjustment on there. Right, so what else we get? We get these long screws here, handles on them, and those are for our table mounts. And you put 2 of these on the case, and the spacing on the back of these brackets, and by the way, these are really well done. The machining is very nice on them. You can see they've got their logo kind of etched into them. There we go. See that a little better that way on one side. Yeah, so we just bolt this on the back. Again, the spacing here matches the spacing between these. You can bolt it on either higher or lower, depending on what you need to do in your particular mounting situation. You cannot, well, let's see. I think you can mount them this way too if you wanted to. Yeah, it looks like it. They line right up. So you can actually mount it this way if you wanted to and clamp it on something. So if you had something coming out straight, yeah, you could clamp it onto that. I might experiment with that once I figure out how I'm going to get this mounted. So we get 2 of those, and you do use these in tandem. It's not like there's an extra one or something. So we'll put those aside. And in hardware bag, we get these little pieces here, these dome cap pieces, and of course, that's part of the cinching system that we're going to use on these guys. See that little notch right there? This is going to fit in that notch. In fact, let me take it out so we can see a little better. Make sure that it will fit in that notch. And we get 3 of those. So I'm guessing one's an extra. So this would fit in the notch like that. And that allows this to turn inside the threaded parts on our bracket. You can see the threads in there. And this remain stationary. So it doesn't get all binding up and stuff when we're trying to tighten it down. All right. We get some stickers. So if you want to put the numbers on your shifter plate, so you know which gear is what, you can do that. Get a couple of those, get 2 of them. We have a USB cable, nice gold-plated unit here for the USB on the shifter to the USB-A over to the computer. We also get a USB-A to A, and that would be for the CAN bus functions for programming and whatever else we can do as far as the software. We get a pretty good set here of these Allen wrenches. Of course, these are your generic Allen wrenches, nothing special here, but it's better than having no tools, right? What else we got? Oh, let me show you this one. This is the sequential shifter, and you can see it's got these huge ball bearings in here with springs behind them, well greased as it should be, and really pretty simple, just some switches here, right? And that's how they work. And it looks like we're going to have to hook them up to something to make them work, because I don't see any other, there's got to be an electrical connection in there for this. Instead, once we do the look inside, be able to see all this and determine what's what and how it works. Anything else about this? Yeah, we have some tensioners on each side of those ball bearings, so we can make it harder or softer to do our shifting. And of course, it doesn't matter as far as the switches go, as far as the tension is because these ball bearings and the springs are taking it. So it's kind of a preload, if you will. Again, a nice thick, it's about 4 millimeters thick, I imagine. Looks about 4, doesn't look 5. Aluminum plate here. And this screw here is to help you get it out of the enclosure, because I took this out of the enclosure. And I was wondering what this was because it didn't really, let's see, will it do? Nah. I was thinking it's actually kind of hitting that tension adjuster right there. But I don't think that's a tension adjuster lock or anything, because then we would have to have one on the other side, wouldn't we? So I think this is just a way to get it out if you get stuck and you got your screws out, because the screw holes themselves, there's little plateaus inside of this casing that rest, so you can't really get anything under it. At least that's what I'm thinking. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like when we light it up. Got to see that, right? And this is what will be facing you. I don't know if there's a way to turn this off or not, but that's what it does. In fact, let me kill this light so we can see it a little better, if that's possible. Let me go ahead and dim this down a little bit. How about that? As dim as I can go. But there's a rotating LED in there. It's changing colors, but you're not going to be able to see it. It's just not showing up on the camera, right? Maybe you see a little bit of it there. Hard for me to tell on this little monitor. Let's turn it this way. Of course, the human eye can see it pretty good. So basically what we have is a purple color, green, and blue is kind of looping around on there as you have it plugged in. Maybe there's a way to turn that off if it irritates you. I would imagine there is. If not, we could always go in and unplug it, right? All right, so anyway, that's the closer look. And what we'll do next, obviously, is I think I'll just go ahead and do the look inside segment, because once we're done with that, then all we have to do is go mount it up, right? So yeah, we'll get to the next segment. I have the internals now out of the casement. And this casement, I thought it was an extruded type of aluminum at first, but it looks like it might be a CNC unit because there's this big beefy pieces left in there to get added support, obviously, for the case itself and a nice rigid place to mount this assembly to. And there's 4 bolts holding this into this. So, plus we have the chamfering on the light hole. So I was thinking this is probably CNC machined. The coating is uniform outside and in. There is no exposed silver that you've seen a lot of casements. When you take them off, there's like they sprayed some around here, so it looked good from the outside, but when you pull it apart, it's all silvery inside. I can't find anything like that in here. So yeah, inside and out anodization usually is an indication of a quality production process. Let's take a look at the assembly itself. We'll talk about the circuit board in a minute. And obviously this is all moving when we're moving it back and forth. We're doing our H pattern shifting. There is a notch feeling when we're pushing it. You can see it notch through the H pattern shifting, and that is because of this piece here. Looks like we have a bronze piece here that has a set screw in it, and that's our tension adjustment. But there's also some indentations on this piece here. Well, that's going to show up in the video, but there it is. There's one of them, and there's 3 of them apparently. There's one for that position. When I move it to the middle position, there's another notch, and then I move it to this position. I'll turn this around. You can see there's another indentation in that position. And this feels like it's some kind of a Delrin or something. So yeah, that's how we get our feel for the shift. And of course, I had this all the way in just about because I like a heavy feeling shifter, and that's what I had to do to get it feeling as much as I could get out of it anyway, because I'm used to a heavier, dutier type of shifter. Now, the mechanicals here, this is I'm calling this a 2-cam system. It has these little cam followers here that as we push this sideways, you can see how that moves each one of those. And we have a ball bearing, or rather not a ball bearing, but a seal bearing. It's actually a seal bearing in there that's riding on those 2 followers. And we also have seal bearings down in here. Well, you can see that, but I'm trying to give you a shot that they're rotating on. So a nice build quality. Right away, I can tell that this is a pretty well engineered piece here. And again, this is all aluminum. The shaft is stainless steel. But yeah, everything is just well done. It's very well assembled. The machining is very good. It just feels good when you're using it. And when you're using it in this way too. And when I was actually using it in the car, in both sequential and H pattern shifter, I really couldn't complain too much about it. This thing's really kind of punching above its $200 price point, I think, when you have it all together and you're using it. It just does a good job. And I can't really find anything I can complain about the way they built this. There's the main pivot rod there, and it's riding on it. It looks like a bushing. I don't think that's a bearing. It's just a bushing in there. Yeah, this is just looking good. And we can see the bottom there where the shaft is actually going through its mount. So yeah, again, nothing to complain about. I like what I'm seeing here. Let's talk about the sensors. These are contactless sensors. You can see them. Well, you can't really see in there, but there's some hollow. Go this way. So these are like infrared sensors. So there's, I don't know how you're going to see in there, the side of that thing, but you can see a little bit of air in there. But yeah, nice contactless sensors. That means this should have a long life cycle on these guys. You can see one's labeled Y and one's labeled X, so you can't get them mixed up in case you have to replace them, I guess. The circuit board itself is a proprietary custom board made. It was designed by VNM Simulation, obviously, who makes this shifter, and made in Vietnam. And a very professional looking circuit board here. You see our plug pieces there, nice and soldered to the back there. Yeah, I like what I'm seeing here, guys. This is nice. And there's the version of the shifter. It's a V101. Okay, I think that's what that says. So just a good system as far as the design, and the execution is very good here. Again, I think it's punching above that $200 price point a bit here, especially when I see how it's made now that I've been running it. Of course, I usually run everything before I ever take it to the bench and do a look inside, no matter what it is, because yeah, you never know what's going to happen when you start taking things apart when it comes to electronics and hardware assemblies. So yeah, I really am impressed here with what's going on. I think I was not expecting this. I thought it would be something a little, cheaper looking, but yeah, this is, again, I think this is punching above its weight a bit as far as the design and implementation. So yeah, there's our look inside. So let's take this H pattern shifter and make it a sequential shifter. I've been using it as an H pattern shifter, and I've already been using it as a sequential too, actually. And it feels pretty good in both ways. And that's not too common for something that's a two-trick pony to feel good either way. But we'll talk more about that once we get to the driving segment. But we're going to switch this out now. If you saw this plate in the closer look, it had these switches on it when I took it out of the box. Usually I do a closer look. I pull everything out of the box and just shoot the closer look stuff, what's in the box. And you don't need these. They have contactless sensors in here on the X and Y axes. So we don't need this switch. So why was the switch there? Well, it turns out that I got a beta plate, or one of the older beta plates, and that happens every so often when I get something from a manufacturer. And it had the switches still on there, something they were experimenting with. But they decided to toss the idea of switches and go with the contactless sensor, which is a great idea, and it adds value overall to the shifter itself, I think. Now we have these balls in here. They're captured in some indentations. You won't be able to see that, but there's these indentations inside of this part here on each side. It's flat in the middle, so there is a limit. In other words, it doesn't let the ball bearing go but so far, and then it stops because the indentation or channel in there also stops. Some pretty good stiff springs behind there, and we adjust the spring tension with a 6mm wrench here and here. You want to make sure you kind of balance that out when you're doing it, but you will have to remove it and bring it up a little bit to make the adjustment and then put it back down. So not the easiest thing to do as far as adjusting spring tension, but I usually want a lot of tension on mine, so I just kind of ran them down pretty good and just went with it like that, and it worked out pretty good. So yeah, that's the only adjustments you have on this. Now you'll notice there's a screw here that won't let this come out but so far. And I believe that's a limiter, so you can't take it out and lose it. So I'm not sure why they don't have one on this side though. Of course, maybe it was because of the beta unit. Anyway, let's go ahead and swap this out. Simple, we just take our knob off, and this is the H pattern knob I was using. And I like this knob, actually. It felt pretty good in hand. It's very smooth. The anodization on this is very good. And it's got some heft to it. I tell you, it's got some heft. It must have a metal steel insert, unless the whole thing is steel. I don't think it is. It's aluminum, but it's got to have some kind of, it just feels heavier than aluminum should feel. And yeah, but it has a good heft to it. That's what the whole point of what I was trying to say there. We're going to be using this guy, which also has a pretty good heft to it. And a heavier shifter, by the way, heavier shifter knob just makes the shifter feel better overall in quality, in my mind. If you put a carbon fiber knob on there, or a 3D printed or something like that, it just doesn't feel the same as it does with a real metal one like this and these aluminum ones. They're pretty beefy units. So we have to take this adapter off to get the plate off though. And we're going to have to take this, which is these little set screws. And you saw this in a closer look. I think I showed it to you. These little set screws, 180 degrees opposing each other, and they are 2mm. So we just take our 2mm wrench, our trusty Huddy, and loosen them up. One side, and we'll go ahead and get the other one like that, and it comes right off. Very simple. And this is going to scratch up the shaft a bit when we use this, and that's typical of this kind of friction system. It is what it is. And of course we can adjust it where we want the shifter to be as far as the depth of the actual knob itself. So there are limits to how far we can go down, but typically on a sequential, I like to have it a little high anyway. So I'm going to put this up as high as I can get it when I put this on, but we're not there yet. We still have to take this off, and that's very simple. That's a 3mm. I'm not using a hoodie for this one. So we'll go ahead, and I got these kind of pre-loosened a little bit so they come out easier. And let's see. Here we go. So all the screws come out. And one thing I did notice about this when I got it, and I mentioned that to the manufacturer, and they're going to make sure that that doesn't happen again. You can see that there's some rust on these steel bolts here. See that rust? I'm going to put a dab of lube on there and take a paper towel and just clean it off. But yeah, I'd like to see something else used that doesn't rust. Although it wouldn't rust here at the SRG because it's a controlled environment, air conditioned in the summer, heated in the winter. But yeah, I think it's a shipping thing. They were just kind of they must have been sitting around a little bit in humidity, obviously, and started rusting. So I would like to see them use some different screws than this. Yeah, doesn't look too hot when you take it out, even though they work fine. So we'll go ahead and pull the plate off. And again, the plate's just like any other plate. We have that plastic insert that kind of protrudes a little bit past the metal there so that it's a quiet shifter, and it also helps keep the wear and tear down on our shaft. Now, these are keyed, by the way. The shape of these have to be put on the correct way. If I put this back on like this, it won't go on. It's like a puzzle. But you have to twist it around, then it goes on. So there's only one way to put them on. So if you get confused and you grab one thing and you slide it on there, it doesn't go on right, then you know all you have to do is twist it around. And of course, I'm just going to put the shaft in between these two balls here. Slide it in gently. I think I got this oriented right already. Yes. And it just drops right in. Very simple. So then we'll go ahead and put our screws back in. I'm going to pull them back out and lube them later before I finish my review. They go in easy enough, though. It's not like they're sticking or anything. So it's just one of those things where you kind of go, what? Rust? But I'm sure that they will take care of that, the ones that are shipping. At least that's what they told me. All right, so one more. Now we got to get our adapter back on. Again, just slide it on. And this threads are sticking up because obviously this won't go any further than this little lip here. You see that? We got a little protrusion out there that's wider than the threads themselves on the bottom base. So it can't go past that anyway. You can see they're actually cut out in here. I think you can see that. See how the threads are kind of protruding a little bit. So it'll bump up to the start of that threaded part there. It won't go any further. So that's the reason you have to, if you want to go up and down or deeper, you have to do it with this. Right. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to go up to the top because I like my sequential shifter stuff to be kind of high. And also, if you're changing this in and out, you can feel where it was before, just by you loosen it just a little bit, just as it makes contact, and you loosen just a little bit, and you can feel where that thing's fallen into the groove that it was in before. And that's where I like to tighten them up at, because that ensures it helps it keep it from slipping if it ever does. And I haven't had this slip on me. So far, so good, right? It's doing a good job. And you don't want to turn it too hard to where you strip this out, because then you're going to have to drill it out, and it's just a big mess. All right. That's about as tight as I had it before, and it worked fine. We're going to put the big one back on, or the long one. And that goes on rather nicely. Yeah, you can actually feel it hit the start of that threaded part in the knob that I just showed you. And that's it. There's no notch to this when you're pushing it. There's not like you're pushing through a notch and making a mechanical change. But, a lot of sequential shifters in modern cars anyway don't have that, because they're just, sensors in there. And their sensors are sending the signals to the gearbox, and the gearbox has an electric motor turning the indexer shaft sitting on top of that sequential. But it felt pretty good once I had it bolted down and mounted tightly, and we'll see how I did that. It actually felt pretty good slapping on it. and slap another way. It never missed a shift. Everything worked fine. So yeah, so that's it. Not a whole lot to it, as you might imagine, switching out from our H pattern mode to the sequential. And again, if you're going to adjust the tension on this, we'd have to loosen these again, pull it back up, and then make our adjustments and put it back down. Now it's time to get our shifter mounted. And there's several ways to go about doing this beyond what they give you in the kit. And I'm going to be doing that, and I'll explain that later because of how I'm going to be mounting this to a profile rig. Now we have, of course, all these holes here that we can mount these guys, these brackets. They have 2 holes in them. And you'll notice the holes are offset there. If I flip it around the other way, so it's biased one way or another. So if you're mounting this, and these are all M6 holes, by the way, and they do give you some bolts to handle that. But there are also some 5mm holes on the bottom. So you could fabricate a plate and bolt it onto the bottom if you wanted to, if your mounting requirements needed you to do that. But I'm going to be using these holes. Another thing, when you're using these holes and mounting it, you do want to be mindful of the USB connector here. Make sure that whatever you're mounting it to, it has to have the USB connector available, or you won't be able to plug it in, right? Typically, most people will be mounting this, I think, this way. The typical desk mount setup. Just mount this bracket over here to the casing, and then we'll have our knobbed threaded rod here, and this has a little indentation machined into it, so it fits the little flange here that will actually clamp against whatever you're going to be mounting it against. Like I said, it's a typical type of desktop mount. And you can clamp this to profile too, depending on what you need to do. What I'm going to be doing is mounting this to a 4080 profile. And I'm going to be mindful of the offset that I need. So if I put this, let's say I take, there's 2 holes there. We have 2 sets of 2 holes, right? I mean, you can do either this side or that side. If I take it on this side, that configuration, you can see the offset. So this pushes the shifter, if I mount it to something, over towards me in the sitting position because it's a right-hand position. If I flip it around this way, the offset holes are going to make it hang on the other side. So then I'm shifting it away from me if I'm a right side shifter. But if I'm a left hand shifter, and this is mounted on the left side, then again, this would be pushing it towards me on my left side, depending on your situation. So you just want to remember that offset hole bit there. I'm going to be biasing it towards me because of the right hand shifting this way. Or I might not. It depends on, once I get my setup going, I might have to go this way anyway because I don't have enough room for it to go that far. But we'll find out once we get it mounted. So what I'm going to do is, when I figured out that probably the best way for me to go about this, and remember, they do give us some mounting hardware here, these little socket head cap M6. And these fit into there, obviously, and will go into the counterboard holes that are in the bracket itself. So let's sit down in there nice and flush. Very nice. Very nice machining on all this. Again, if I haven't mentioned that before in a closer look, I think I did. Did a good job here. So what I'm going to do is, because this is an M8 thread, it will fit a T-nut with an M8 thread. Where's my T-nut? There it is. Like this. So I can actually take this and just screw it right into that M8 T-nut. How convenient is that, right? So now that we have that, I could think about putting it maybe into some channel. So this would actually fit right in a channel like this. Well, let me back it out a little bit. Like that. And then I can tighten this up like so. And have a nice stiff mount right in here. So my thought is, because I'm putting this in 4080, there, I'm going to mount this perpendicular to the 4080 piece. And I got a piece right here. Show you what I mean. Of course, this isn't wide enough, or long enough rather, but it's going to be sitting like this. So I'll have 2 corner brackets on here. You can see I have the M8s already on this. And I'll have these 2 corner brackets going into the channels like that. And these are tabbed. You can see the tabs on them on this side, not tabbed on this side because they have to sit flush to the profile. So that will sit very nicely into those tabs like that. And that's going to lock it in pretty good. So I'm thinking this is going to be a very solid mount. This will sit on inboard of the 4080, and we'll see more of this once I get it mounted. So it'll be sitting like this. The shifter will be sitting on top of the profile like this, with the clamps biased. I think I'm going to end up with the clamps being biased over this way, so that they'll be sitting here. The more I was looking at it, so it kind of pushes it towards me, but I don't know until I get it over there and take a look at how far I have before it bumps into the seat, or any other obstruction for that matter. So I just don't know yet at this point. But I do know that I can take this nut instead of the flange, like I'm using it in a desk mount, and get this on here like this. And I can slide it in here. I'm going to have to back it out a little bit though, because it's not going to. Let me go to get it further down. There we go. So I'm going to put this in here like this and back this out far enough. The farther I back it out, the more room I have here, depending on what I need. So now I want to put this in like this. And you can see how much space is over here on the side here. And that's not going to work because I want this up against this side. So what I'm going to have to do is take this out and roll this in. It's going to be an experimental thing. I have to try it here and there because I don't have a lot of room inside the channel. See how that piece is coming out? It's going to bottom out against the channel eventually. And yeah, that means that's where it stops screwing in and then pulls it up against the channel, makes everything tight. But I have to have, I want as minimal amount of room over here on this side that I can get. So actually I'm kind of going the wrong way, aren't I? So I want to get this in so this is very tight over here, as tight as I can get it anyway. I might have to shim it up a bit. We just have to wait and see how this goes. But I think this is going to work pretty well. As you can see, once this is in here and I tighten it up and get this gap taken care of by adjusting this piece, then this is going to be nice and tight. And not only that, but we'll be sitting on profile, this piece of profile here. So we've also got a place for the shifter to rest as it's sitting there. So it's going to be pulled in, it's going to be attached to this 40 series profile, and then it's going to be sitting on that 4080's 40 series or 40 millimeter side like this. So this, I'm thinking this is about as solid as a mount that you can get on this, but I could be wrong. Again, there's only one way for us to find this out, and that's to take it over there and get it mounted on the cockpit. And that's what we're going to do now. And when we come back, we'll be able to see how all that went. So the shifter's mounted now, and it went pretty much like I thought it would. The 40 series profile is sitting here on the other side of our 4080 piece here of this GT Omega Prime cockpit. And the T-nuts went into the channels fine. And when I was cranking down on this, it really puts more pressure between this, the channel, and this part of the bracket, kind of squeezing it in here. The 40 series profile just wasn't quite thick enough. By the time this bottoms out on the channel, this threaded rod can't go any further in, and this is all the way tight up against the channel lips. There's still a gap. Remember, this bracket is attached here, so it's not really floating or anything. So if you look over here, what I ended up doing, I had some spacer material because there was a gap. And you can see I have about, I'd say it's about 4 millimeters worth of material in there. That's 2 of these spacers. I bought a bunch of these spacers a long time ago. Man, they sure save the day around the SRG a lot when I'm doing my reviews. So you can see the spacer material runs all the way down. How well you can see that in this dark. And it actually comes out the bottom a little bit. I don't know if you can see that right in here. So we've got good grip there on that part. And once I filled that gap up, everything was good. Now it's very solid. Before it was twisting a little bit that way. I could actually kind of twist it with my hand. But now, yeah, it's very solid as far as the whole mount goes. And it moves a little bit, but mostly that's this long bar here, the shifter mount for this cockpit. But you have to remember, this bar is not meant to be pushed this way. It's meant to be pulled when you're shifting or using a handbrake on it. So yeah, it works great that way. If we come back here and put pressure on it, yeah, the only thing flexing is this shaft in here when it goes up against the gate. Wanted to show you again the corner brackets if you didn't see a good shot of them before, and that worked out pretty well too. We got 2 on each side, very solid. Obviously, as you could imagine, that's not going anywhere. So that really worked out quite well there. So what we'll do now is go ahead and get around the other side here, and we'll get in the cockpit. Let's see what we got. I did have to raise the bar up pretty much all the way back here, so it can't go any higher. I would have to, in fact, I can't get it any higher. That's about as high as it goes. So, but that turned out to be pretty good for me. If I'm going to be using the steering wheel here, yeah, it puts it right where I need it to be to do my shifts and get back to my steering wheel quickly. So yes, all about shifting and getting back quickly and get both of those hands back on the wheel so you can control your car. Now, as far as the feel goes, of course, when I'm driving, it's going to be a little bit different, and I might have a different opinion about it. But right now, I can feel it when it goes through the middle section, comes out of that gate, and I have it about as tight as I can get it. So I can feel it going between the gates, not just because of the gate itself, but because of the notch between here and there. When it goes to neutral and then comes back in, there's another notch going either way. So you can actually feel that. It doesn't feel like it does on my Pro Sim shifter, obviously, but you can just certainly feel it. And it feels like this is going to be a pretty easy shifting shifter when I'm using it. I think this is going to work out pretty well. Of course, we'll find out. In the handle, I had to go back and tighten the insert in there, the little set screws that go on either side of the shaft. Went ahead and cranked down on them once I got the height to be where I wanted it to. And if you think about it, this is a pretty good height. It reminds me of I had a 2001 S2000 Honda, and yeah, it had kind of a short shift too once I got a shifter that would sit down on top of it and kind of go deep. And it feels like you could actually just kind of sit here and do this with your hand resting on here and do all your shifting. So it's kind of like a twitch of the wrist. I'm going to try that technique and see how it works. It works pretty good for first, second, third, and fourth. But going over to fifth is, I don't know. I guess I could get used to it. But you can see how comfortable that would be, right? Just shifting like this instead of up there doing this. Either way. So I think this is going to work out fine. Of course, the next thing we want to do, get some pedals in here, obviously. And then we'll go ahead and get in and do some driving and see how this shifter reacts to some heel and toe. So we're going to look at the configuration software that comes with this shifter. It's called the VNM configuration, and this is version 1.4.0.4. Also, there's a couple of tabs up here called base and hardware. You can see when you hit base, a wheel comes up. So it looks like VNM is developing a direct drive force feedback wheel. A little hardware tab for PID controllers, motor information. But we're going to go to the shifter. And we also have a debug if you need it for, obviously, troubleshooting. A lot of people are going to be messing with, I would imagine, here is the options over here where it has the enable LED effects. And you can see I have an effect right now. And this is where we can change things. Right now I'm on rainbow. I'm going to go down here to fade custom. I've already set that up as a blue color, it just fades in and out. We're going to unclick the rainbow and click the blue fade. I'm going to save that. And in the instructions, you can see how fast it went to blue fade. Now in the instructions of the PDF, it says that you need to unplug the USB and then plug it back in, but apparently from my experimentation here, you don't have to do that. Also, we have a calibration window here for H pattern or sequential. And that's pretty cool because we can go over here. I don't know why it says select report, but if you select shifter configuration, you can see a little green ball lights up there. I'm going to go ahead and click on it so it stays there. And I'm in neutral right now on the shifter. Got it in between the gates there. I am going to take it and put it in third gear. There it is. And you can see the ball moved up into the third gear range. Now you can drag these around, these lines. From what I'm reading in the manual, these are the zones that these contactless sensors are picking up from the position of the shifter lever itself. So if I put it in fourth, you can see it move down to 4, like that. And again, this makes sure that the sensor knows what gate that is in, so you don't get your shifts messed up. So if you have this messed up, you can actually do some adjustment to this, and you can calibrate it up here if you want to. I never had to do any of this. Right out of the box, it just worked, so I usually don't mess with anything unless something's wrong, then I'll mess with it. But if it's working, I'm not going to mess with it that much. So yeah, this is a nice little configuration tool, I think. Here, you can play around with it a little bit if you want. I don't think it's necessary to have one for a shifter, but there you go, the VNM configuration software. We're at Sebring and iRacing in the Lotus 79, a great way to put some pressure on an H pattern shifter. Doing a little heel and toe exercise to put a little pressure on me at the same time. Now, I have the tension adjusted all the way as far as it would go and still make a shift. You can actually adjust that tensioner so that you can't make a shift. It just gets in the way, I guess. The spring gets so compressed that it can't give anymore. So anyway, yeah, I like what I'm feeling here. I'm keeping my expectations properly managed here. It's a $200 shifter, but already, if you saw the review up to this point, this is an all-metal shifter inside and out, and it feels like it when you're using it. You can really bang on this thing, and it just doesn't give it all. It has a good tactile feedback to it. You can feel going into the gates really well with the lever slamming into those gates. You can also still feel some of the indentation in there from the mechanism inside that gives you that feeling that you're actually moving a gear, or you're moving one of the selector rods or a fork or something like that in a gearbox. Not obviously like a Pro Sim, but you can still feel a hint of it. In most of the H pattern shifters I use, it just goes away. All you feel is the gate when you're slamming in the gate. There's still a hint of it there, which impressed me. I didn't think there would be. The knob on this is a good roundish knob as far as ergonomics go. I didn't have any problem with that. It didn't come loose. You want to make sure it's good and tight though. That insert that you slide down on the shaft and tighten with those two set screws. You want to make sure both of those set screws are good and tight, but you don't want to strip them either, so there's a fine line there. But I got it where it never moved. So, and I didn't think that was going to happen either. So that's another plus on in my checklist that, yeah, this is something that you don't want happening while you're racing. Overall, it's just a good feeling H pattern shifter. It never gave me any problems. It was easy for me to adjust to as far as the gates in it. So again, at this price point of $200, I can't find much to complain about here. It just does what it does, and you can slam on it and it takes it. Now, I also put it in sequential mode, and we went over to the rallycross cars for that and do a little jumping and some shifting at the same time. And here's where, a lot of shifters that do the H pattern and do the sequential, one's better than the other. A one-trick pony, trying to make it a two-trick pony is not easy. But this does a pretty good job, and I think it's because of those really heavy-duty springs and those big ball bearings that are in this mechanism. So when you're pushing it and you're pulling against it, you're not really feeling like you're turning the selector rod in a sequential transmission when you're doing it, but you do have some good pressure when you're slamming it forward, or you're pulling it backwards and snapping it backwards when you're using it. And never missed a shift. The sensors inside did a great job, and that includes when I was over in H pattern mode. I never had any glitches or anything that with it, so it's a solid unit as far as that's concerned. I never had any issues with it. So again, in sequential mode is kind of, there's a lot of different sequential shifters out there. Some feel better than others. I would say this is expected to feel like it does at $200 price point. It's not like I'm really notching something when I'm pushing it. And even at the highest levels of tension, it still felt not quite as heavy as I wanted it. But, I really can't complain too much because it got the job done, and I never missed a shift when I was using it. And really, at the end of the day, I think that's what we're after when we're looking for a shifter. Final thoughts on the VNM Shifter V1. These are manufactured at a small shop in Vietnam. Out of the box, it has a very solid feel to it. The case is made from aluminum that has nicely done anodization both on the outside and inside. It comes with two shifting knobs, one for H pattern duties and one for sequential use. There is an adjustable knob mounting unit that allows you to adjust the height of the shifter knobs. It is secured to the shaft by two opposing set screws. You want to make sure you get these nice and tight to prevent slippage during hard shifting use. This shifter comes with a 7-speed gate and sequential gate. They do have an 8-speed and 6-speed gate available as an add-on product. The gates have ramps cut into them to help guide the shaft to the proper gate. The shifting mechanism is made from CNC aluminum. It is a complex-looking piece of kit that gives the impression of a high-quality build. It uses sealed bearings at crucial pivot points. There is a tension adjustment element that uses a spring-tensioned ball bearing riding on a nylon plate with indentations to simulate shifting gears. The good news continues with the electronic solution that I found, a custom circuit board that looks to be well done. There are contactless switches which should give a long life cycle. I was able to find a good mounting solution using the included dual clamp system, resulting in a very solid mount, which is what you need to really tell how a shifter performs under pressure. During H pattern shifting, I found I had to adjust the tensioner screw to its maximum range to get the feeling I wanted during my shifting. I found it easy to get up to speed with this shifter. The gate spacing felt familiar and allowed me to make shifts with minimal error from the start. and never missing shifts soon thereafter. In sequential mode, it didn't feel like I was turning a selector shaft, but it did have enough pressure available in the spring tensioned ball bearing to get the job done. I think its H pattern performance felt a bit better. I did hammer on this shifter for a few hours worth of driving, and it never gave the impression of any weakness. Its solid all-metal construction came into play here. At a current price of $200 plus shipping, I believe the VNM shifter punches a bit above its weight. Currently, to purchase this shifter, you will need to join VNM's Facebook group or go to their Discord server and inquire. VNM is working on completing their website sometime in March. Overall, I liked using this shifter, and when considering the price point, I would give this one a serious look. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.